Okay, here we are with some more inequalities. So let's take a look at this. State the solution of each inequality. If you solve this and you subtract 4, you're going to get x squared greater than negative 4. And then you take the square root and you say, oh, that's no solution. Okay, and that's not true. Because if I plug in 1 for x squared, that's 1, positive 1. Is that greater than negative 4? Sure is. So the question you have to do is, before you even start, is look at the problem. Anytime you square something, you're going to get a positive. So a positive plus a 4 is always going to be greater than 0. So this is any number you plug in for x, you're not going to get less than 0 when you add 4 to it. Okay, so that is going to be all real numbers. And then the x squared plus 4 is less than 0. Are you ever going to get anything that's negative? That's what less than 0 means, and that's no. So that one is no solution. So let's use our brains as we progress from here. All right. Express the solutions in terms of intervals whenever possible. Okay, so now you look at this and say greater than 0. Well, what makes these greater than 0? What makes them equal to 0? So 3x plus 1, and then you have 5 minus 10x. So we're going to make the table, and we're going to make a number chart here. So what are the special numbers? So you set each of these equal to 0 and solve them. So you subtract 1, divide off the 3. Okay, so you can all solve that. So that's negative 1/3. What about the other one? Let's put total here as well. All right, so now what is 5 minus 10x equal to 0? So we subtract 5, and again, don't forget your minus sign, that's negative 10x. Divide off the negative 10, and we get positive 1/2. Negative 5 over a negative 10 is positive. All right, so those are our two possible numbers that we're looking at. So on a number line, negative 1/3 is going to be first, and then positive 1/2 will be second. All right, now it can't be equal to 0 here, okay? Because those won't work, all right? So if it's equal to 0, there's no equal sign in the inequality, so it needs to be an open dot at those two values. Now, what we're going to do is look at numbers on both sides of these values. What's less than negative 1/3? How about 2? How about just, negative 1? So negative 1, if we plug that into 3x plus 1, 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, plus 1 is negative 2. And plug negative 1 in for the next one, 5 minus 10 times negative 1. So the negative 10 times the negative 1 is positive 10. So this would be 5 plus 10, or 15. That's positive. All right, so now I want to go back and erase what I did here, all right? And this, when I plugged a negative 1 in, 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, plus 1 was negative 2. That's what we said, meaning it's negative. So all the numbers left of negative 1/3 in the first one is going to be negative. In the second one, it's going to be positive. So when you multiply those two together, because that's what we're doing, you get a negative, which does not match what we're looking for. We're looking for positive totals. So anything from negative infinity to negative 1/3, that's not going to work. Let's go to the next set of numbers in between negative 1/3 and 1/2. Well, 0's in between there. And if we plug 0 in for x in the first one, 3 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. So that's positive. In this range, you'll get a positive answer for the 3x plus 1. And the 5 minus 10x, plug 0 in. 10 times 0 is 0. 5 minus 0 is 5. That's positive. And what is a positive times a positive? A positive. So from negative 1/3 to positive 1/2, that is going to be part of our solution. These work. So on the number line, if we make this a number line here, this is shaded. And this is our interval notation right here. But you still have to check anything above this, because sometimes it just goes to positive infinity. So let's plug in the number 1, because 1 is bigger than 1/2. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, that's positive. 10 times 1 is 10, so 5 minus 10 is negative. Okay, and we get a negative there. So from 1/2 to positive infinity, that's going to be a negative value. So our answer is right here, and that's our interval notation. So from now on, let's go a little bit faster. Okay, now we got 3 of these. I'm just going to set up the table ahead of time. X plus 2, x minus 1, and 4 minus x. When you multiply all 3 of these together for a total, what are we looking for? We're looking for either equal to 0 or negative. So negative values is what we're looking at for our total. So now we have to know our number line. So negative 2 would make that equal to 0. Positive 1 makes that equal to 0. And positive 4 makes that go to 0. So they happen to be in order. So on our number line, we'll just do it this way. We'll put a number line up above here. Make it easier. Negative infinity. And we'll put negative 2 here. We'll put positive 1 there and positive 4 here. So those 3 numbers, all the way to positive infinity, those 3 numbers are equal at 0. Okay, at their numbers, the whole thing becomes 0. So these are going to be colored in dots here, okay? Those are all colored in. All right, so now we got to check everything to in between these values and to the left of negative 2. So let's plug in negative 3. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. Negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. And 4 minus a negative 3 would be positive 7. If you multiply a negative times a negative, you get positive times a positive is a positive. And we are not looking for that. So that's not shaded. Between negative 2 and 1 now, how about 0? We'll plug 0 in. 0 plus 2 is positive. 0 minus 1 is negative. 4 minus 0 is positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. Negative times a positive is still a negative. So from negative 2 to 1, including those are possibilities. So we shade that in if we were to show a graph of it. Now go in between 1 and 4. How about we just pick 2? Okay, so 2 plus 2 is 4. 2 minus 1 is 1. 4 minus 2 is 2. And you multiply all those together, you get positive. And now we check past 4. How about the number 5? So 5 plus 2 is 7. 5 minus 1 is 4. And 4 minus 5 is negative. There, you'll get a negative if you multiply all those together, which is what we're looking for. So here we're going to go from 4, including 4, to positive infinity. And since there's more than 1, put a U in between them because this is what is shaded. Let's go ahead and just make it obvious. That's what your graph would look like, and that is your interval notation there. All right, 7. Now we have to go ahead and first factor. So x minus 3x plus 2 less than 0. So there it is. We have number 3 to make the positive 3 makes it 0. Negative 2 makes it 0. So we want all negative numbers. That's what less than 0 means. So not equal to. So on a number line, negative 2 is first, open dot, because we don't want it equal to 0. And then positive 3, open dot. And this will be our workspace here, and we put x minus 3 here, okay, and we put negative infinity, positive infinity up there, and x plus 2 next, and the total is last. All right, so we're looking for negative values. So left of negative 2 is negative 3. If we plug negative 3 in, I really needed to give a little more space here. So let's write that again. X minus 3, x plus 2, and total. So if I put negative 3 in, and put it in the first x here. Negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. We multiply those together because that's what we're doing up top here. We get a positive. Well, we don't want those. So we don't want anything from negative infinity to negative 2. Now between negative 2 and 3, we have 0. Let's plug 0 in. So 0 minus 3 is negative. 0 plus 2 is positive. Multiply those together, we get a negative. So from negative 2 to 3, that's our first interval. You still have to check the others. So let's plug 4 in. 4 minus 3 is positive. 4 plus 2 is positive. That's positive. So that should be our answer. Okay, next. Factor again. Oops. X and x. Oh, we forgot. We got to subtract 1. So it's going to be x squared minus 2x minus 8 greater than 0. So we're looking for positive answers here. So x squared minus 2x minus 8 would be x minus 4x plus 2. That'll give us a negative 2 and a negative 8. All right, so those are our values, positive 4 and negative 2. So on a number line, from negative infinity to negative 2, and from 4 to positive infinity. All right, and then we have x minus 4. Okay, we have x plus 2, and then we have the totals. All right, so plug in negative 3. Negative 3 minus 4 is negative. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative. Multiply those together. That's a positive. That's what we're looking for. So from negative infinity to negative 2, not including negative 2 because there's no equal sign in the inequality. Now between negative 2 and 4, I always like to choose 0 if I can. That's not part of what we're looking for, but we'll choose 0. So 0 minus 4 is negative. 0 plus 2 is positive. That'll give us a negative. I forgot to kind of show you, first of all, negative 2. And from negative infinity to negative 2. And it doesn't work from negative 2 to 4. So let's plug in number 5. 5 minus 4 is positive. 5 plus 2 is positive. And that gives us positive. So again, it's open at 4. And it's shaded to the right. So we're looking for 4 to positive infinity. That's your interval notation. There's more than one, so union them together. All right, there's your answer. Let's keep going. All right, so we have to just go ahead and simplify everything. 2x squared plus 3x, and then we're going to subtract 5 to the left. And you have your inequality there. We have an equal sign, so we're going to have closed dots here for some of them, maybe both of them, maybe all three, however many there are, supposedly 2 of them. So now we have to factor. So 2x and x, and greater than or equal to 0, that's positive. 5 would be 5 and 1, so let's put 5 here, 1 there. Has to be a positive 3, so positive 5 minus 2 is positive 3. So if we solve these, this would be negative 5 halves, and this would be positive 1. So draw your number line, negative infinity to positive infinity, negative 5 halves, positive 1. And these two values make it equal at 0. There will be a time where you will only have some of them equal. So we want to close dot there, close dot there. Now we got to figure out where the shading is, okay? So we have 2x plus 5 here. We have x minus 1, and then we have our total. Draw our lines down. So left of negative 5 halves, which is negative 2.5, let's do negative 3. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, plus 5 is negative 1. Negative 3 minus 1 is negative. Negative times a negative gives us positive. So yes, we want this shaded. All right, so from negative infinity to negative 5 halves, including 5 halves, that's part of our solution. So don't assume that 0 doesn't work. So let's plug it in. 2 times 0 is 0, plus 5 is positive. 0 minus 1 is negative, gives us a negative. It doesn't work. Number 2, plug 2 in. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 5 is positive. 2 minus 1 is 1, that's positive. Hey, that's positive. So from 1, including 1, to positive infinity, that's going to be shaded as well. So our interval notation is there. Let's go ahead and look at the answer. And there you go. Looks just like what we have. Excellent. All right, again, solve. Make sure you pause this and work on it yourself. All right. So I'm going to move everything in that direction. So I have 0 greater than x squared minus 8x plus 15. And if I want to move this to the other side, I need to change the direction of the inequality. So x squared minus 8x plus 15 is got to be less than 0. So we're looking for negative answers. Okay, factor it. You get x and 3 and 5. How about minus 3 and minus 5? That'll still give us a positive 15, but it'll give us a negative 8 inside. So positive 3 and positive 5 are our possibilities on our number line. And we have 3 and 5. And we're going to put x minus 3 here. And x minus 5. And the total. So less than 3, how about 0? 0 minus 3 is negative. 0 minus 5 is negative. That's positive. That's not what we want. Between 3 and 5 is 4. 4 minus 3 is positive. 4 minus 5 is negative. Multiply those together, we get negative. So from 3 to 5, not including either one. These are open dots here. There's no equal sign. That's going to be shaded. Okay, so from 3 to 5. All right, so now we check past 5. Let's try 6. 6 minus 3 is positive. 6 minus 5 is positive. Multiply together, give us positive. So 3 to 5 is our answer. Let's take a look at the answer key. And there it is, number 13. Okay, so x squared less than 16. Simplify. X squared minus 16 is less than 0. So we're looking for negative values. X squared minus 16 factors, difference of squares. X minus 4, x plus 4. So positive 4 and negative 4 are possibilities, are special numbers, so negative infinity to positive infinity. Negative 4, positive 4, not equal to, so they're open dots. So x minus 4 first, x plus 4 second. It doesn't matter which one's first. You multiply them together anyway, and then your totals. So less than negative 4, let's put negative 5 in. Negative 5 minus 4 is negative 9. Negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. Multiplied together, give us a positive. We're not looking for those. Between negative 4 and 4 is 0, so let's plug 0 in. 0 minus 4 is negative, 0 plus 4 is positive. Multiplied together, give us a negative. That's what we're looking for. So from negative 4 to positive 4, not including either one, that should be shaded. But make sure you are checking past that. Plug 5 in, 5 minus 4 is positive, 5 plus 4 is positive. Multiplied together, give us positive. All right, good job. All right, so hopefully your papers are coming along fine. Don't forget, pause this as you're going and try to do it without me. 17, same type of thing. This is the difference of squares. 5x minus 4, 5x plus 4. Less than 0, so we're looking for negative values. What makes this go to 0? Positive 4/5 or negative 4/5. Well, congratulations. You're going to have to get some weird answers here, or at least try some things if you don't know what you're doing. So negative 4/5, positive 4/5. We can use 0 in between them. All right, so no equal sign, so these are going to be open. And we have 5x minus 4, 5x plus 4, and our total. All right, less than negative 4/5. How about negative 1? 5 times negative 1 is negative 5, minus 4 is negative. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5 plus 4 is negative. Multiplied together, give us positive. All right, so we're not looking for those. How about 0? 5 times 0 is 0, minus 4 is negative. 5 times 0 is 0 plus 4, positive. Multiplied together, give us negative. That's what we're looking for. So from negative 4/5 to 4/5, not including either one, that needs to be shaded. All right, check positive 1. 5 times 1 is 5, minus 4 is positive. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is positive. All right, so that should be our answer. And there it is. 19. Okay, simplify. Let's move this over. So let's just say 16x squared minus 9x greater than or equal to 0. So this, we're looking for positive. We're going to factor out an x, and we get 16x minus 9 greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so those are our two values. Don't forget, x can be 0. Don't drop it. So what do we have? We have a 0 and we have a 9/16 for a possible answer. Put those on a number line, positive infinity, negative infinity, and we go from 0 and 9/16. Okay, so we have x is possible answer. Then we have 16x minus 9, the other answer, and then our total value. Less than 0 is negative 1. So negative 1 for x gives us a negative. And so from here, we just go across. That's what x is going to be. So 16 times negative 1 is negative 16. Minus 9 is a bigger negative. Multiply those together, you get a positive. That's what we're looking for. So from negative infinity to 0. And we do have an equal sign. So this will be colored in. And the 9/16 will be colored in. And it's shaded from negative infinity to 0. Now let's check between 0 and 9/16. How about 1/2? 8/16 is 1/2. Let's plug 1/2 in. Or if you want, we could do 8/16. That'll be easier when you multiply by 16. So obviously x is positive. So 16 times 8/16 minus 9. The 16th reduced to 1. 8 minus 9 is negative. Multiply those two together, you get negative. You don't have to solve it. You just need to know if it's positive or negative. And above 9/16, how about positive 1? That's positive x. 16 times 1 is 16 minus 9 is positive. Multiply together, give you positive. So it's 0 is included. 9/16 is included. All the way to positive infinity. Okay, time to do some precalculus. Actually, this is algebra 2. Remember, 2 is half of the 4, so we treat it like a normal trinomial to factor it. But then you may need to factor after that. So we're going to move the 36 over. So this is x to the 4th plus 5x squared minus 36 greater than or equal to 0. So we're looking for positive answers and also what makes them go to 0. So factors of 36 that give us 5. 9 and 4. All right, so x and x, except now it's going to be x squared, because remember the middle exponent is what goes on these. So 9 and 4, and we need a positive 5, so 9 will be positive, minus the 4 will give us a positive 5. Okay, greater than or equal to 0. All right, so the difference of squares here, you have x minus 2 and x plus 2. And on this side, x squared plus 9 equals 0, so subtract the 9, take the square root, we get plus or minus 3i. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, I'll show you something here in a second, is we can't use imaginary numbers because imaginary numbers aren't on the number line. So really what we're looking at is from negative infinity to infinity. We're going to use negative 2 and positive 2. We still have to do this stuff, except now it's just x plus 2 and x minus 2. Okay? And x squared plus 9. You still have to check that with your totals. Okay? Because they count. Alright? So now let's plug this in. You got three things you got to multiply together. So less than negative 2, let's put in negative 3. You can put in negative 1,000 if you want. Let's do negative 1,000. Negative 1,000 plus 2 is negative. That makes it obvious. Negative 1,000 minus 2 is negative. And negative 1,000 squared is definitely a huge positive number. You square a negative, you get positive. So all that multiplied together, negative times a positive is positive. And we are looking for positive. So from negative infinity to negative 2, it's equal at negative 2. So we need to color those in. All right, and we are shading that way. So it's included. Make a bracket here. Well, that's really bad. And now we'll plug in something else. How about 0? 0 is easy. 0 plus 2 is positive. 0 minus 2 is negative. 0 squared is 0 plus 9 is positive. Multiply those together, you get a negative. We don't want negatives. Bigger than 2, how about we choose 1,000 again? Positive 1,000 plus 2 is positive. 1,000 minus 2 is positive. 1,000 squared is a huge positive. Plus 9 is still positive. Multiply those, you get positive. So from 2, including 2, to positive infinity, That's what that's going to look like. All right? And those are union together. All right, so there's all these solutions in these where everything's gone here, but what makes it equal to 0 is the -2, the +2, and then you have those two imaginary numbers. You have to remember you have 4 answers you have to give for it to be equal to 0. So those are our 4 answers, but that doesn't mean it's the only 4 things that make it equal to 0. You also have greater than 0. So you're looking for 4 answers because of the exponent, but you have infinitely many answers that are shaded. All right, moving on. Okay, for terms, the first thing you should be thinking of, factoring by grouping. So do that, pause it, and do it. And make sure you factor out a negative here. And if those two aren't the same, you did it wrong. All right, so what do we have? We're going to factor out the x plus 2's. And we're left with x squared minus 4 inside, greater than or equal to 0. This is the difference of squares. So you have an x plus 2, and then the difference of squares, x plus 2x minus 2, greater than or equal to 0. So that's a positive value and equal. So what are all our values at? -2, we'll do both of those. You don't need to do it more than once. I'll tell you what this means eventually. And then a +2. So when we actually graph what this looks like on a chart here, on a grid, that will mean something when you have 2 of the exact same zeros. Multiplicity of 2 is what that's called. Just keep that in the back of your mind. All right, so now we're just going to put in -2 and +2. You still have to check all 3 things. So x plus 2. And we're going to square it because there's 2 of them. It'll just make it easier. You can do it separately if you want. And the total value. So my question to you is, if you're going to square it, what happens to any negative value? It's going to be positive. So -1,000 minus 2 is still negative, 998. But then you square it, it's going to be positive. All right? And then you have a -1,000 minus 2 is negative. Multiply those together, you get negative. And we aren't looking for negatives. How about 0? 0 plus 2 is 2. It's positive. Squared is positive. These are all positive. Anytime it's an even exponent on the whole thing, it's going to be positive no matter what number you put in there. So you just put positives straight across the grid here. All right, 0 minus 2 is negative. Multiply those together, you get negative. Okay, is anything going to work here? How about we plug in 3? 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. It's positive. 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 is positive. Positive times a positive is positive. So really, from 2 to positive infinity, and this has an equal sign, so it's supposed to be equal at both of those two. All right? You plug -2 in, it's not going to give you a positive, but it is going to give you 0. Okay? So -2 minus 2 is 0. -2 plus 2 is 0, sorry. 0 times 0 is 0 times whatever the x minus 2 is. It still gives you 0. So -2 is still a possibility. And if you're not sure, anytime you get this, you should double check what you did. So let's double check here. Let's go ahead and put in -3 to make sure we didn't make a mistake. -3 plus 2 is -1. -1 squared is positive. -3 minus 2 is negative. Positive times a negative is still a negative. All right, so how do we say this? Just like that. Except I don't need you to say it like this. Okay, so first of all, let's clean this up a little bit. You got a bracket around the 2 because it's included, and you also have a 2. All right, so your sets, -2, sorry, -2 and 2 to positive infinity. The set notation is really what you should be putting around it. So let that be a lesson for you. All right. Now, here's where some might be equal to 0 and might not be equal to 0. If x is -2, that doesn't make it equal to 0. If x is -2, that makes this thing not doable. You have a 0 in your denominator. Okay, and if x is negative 1, that makes the denominator 0. So those will be open dots at negative 2 and 1. But what you see here is that the x plus 2 and the x plus 2 reduce out. And you're left with x squared all over x plus 1 less than or equal to 0. And that means negative values. Now x still can't be negative 1. All right? So at this point, you need to make sure that you don't eliminate the negative 2. The negative 2 is part of the original problem. So what else is going to make this equal to 0? If the numerator goes to 0, then the whole thing is equal to 0. All right? So that's important as well. Every part of the fraction has to be checked. Well, notice we have an x squared there. If x alone is 0, that makes the top 0, making it equal to 0. So what numbers do we have here? So on our number line, negative infinity, negative 2 is first, negative 1 is next, 0 is now part of it, to positive infinity. So we got a lot of different things in here to look at. We have an x squared, which, what did we learn? Positive, 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 positive. Then you have an x plus 2, and you have an x plus 1, and you have your totals. All right, so let's plug some things in and see what we get. All right, so we are equal. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's just do the positives and negatives for everything else. X plus 2, if we plug in negative 3 plus 2 is negative. Negative 3 plus 1 is negative. Multiply all that together. So you have, and divided by. Okay, so you really need to look at it from the point of view of what we have at the top. X squared and x plus 2, that's on top. All right, so think of it this way. You have this on top. You have an x plus 1 times another x plus 2 on the bottom. All right, so we're just going to do this one time so you can see what's happening here. All right, so x plus 2 and x plus 1 here. All right, so look at this part right here as we do this. Negative 3 squared is positive. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative. On the top, we get a negative, which is what we see right here. The top is negative. X plus 2, so negative 3 plus 2 is negative. And then you have a negative 3 plus 1 is negative. So on the bottom, we would have a negative times a negative or positive if we keep this part in there. Okay? So a negative and a negative, okay, is going to make a positive. So on the top, we have a negative. On the bottom, we have a positive. A negative over a positive is negative. This is what we're looking for. So from negative infinity to negative 2. Okay, so now that we're at this point, we need to make sure we understand what is included and what isn't. So you say, well, there's a negative 2 on top, and that makes it 0 on the top, so it makes it equal. And say, no, on the bottom, the negative 2 makes it not possible. Okay, so because it's also on the bottom, that is not going to be possible. So that needs to be an open dot. All right, so we're shading from negative 2 to positive, or negative infinity. So that would be open. All right, now check between negative 2 and negative 1. Well, guess what? You're going to have to check a fraction. How about negative 1.5? Again, squared is plus. Negative 1.5 plus 2. Think about it. I just want to know positives and negatives. That's a positive. Negative 1.5 plus 2 again is positive. Negative 1.5 plus 1 is negative. All right, I'm going to make a little darker line between top and bottom. Make it a little bit easier here for us. Okay, so now what do we have? On the top is a positive. On the bottom we have negative. Positive divided by negative is a negative. Okay, so it's going to go from negative 2 to negative 1. And negative 1 doesn't work. Remember, it should be an open dot because it's in the denominator. You can't have 0 in your denominator. Okay, now let's check what happens past 1. How about positive 1? Positive 1 squared is positive. 1 plus 2 is positive. 1 plus 2 is positive on the bottom. 1 plus 1 is positive. All of that is positive. I skipped one, sorry. So from we're looking for negative, so from 0 to positive infinity, that's not going to work. How about negative 1 to 0? You're going to have to check negative 1/2, negative 0.5. So negative 0.5 squared is positive. Negative 0.5 plus 2 is positive. Okay, positive on the bottom as well. Negative 0.5 plus 1 is positive. All right, so from negative 1 on, it doesn't work other than, don't forget, 0 is in the top. 0 squared is 0, making the whole thing go to 0, and therefore making this true. So just like one of those last problems we had, your answer should be including the 0 that you have here with the brackets. Let's take a look at the book's answer. And you see that we have the exact same, sorry, I forgot the union there. All right, we have the exact same thing as what the book has. So everything, when you have multiple things, put a U in between them. So that's what's included. I forgot to shade here. So let's get the shading done. Negative 2 to negative 1. And that's how the interval notation should look as well. Okay, moving on. Okay, first thing we want to do is factor. So factor an x out of the top, factor an x out of the bottom, and it's less than or equal to 0, so we have a bunch of equals, but the only thing that gets shaded is what makes the top go to 0. If you got bottom zeros, that's no solution. It's not possible. You'll get weird answers. And the less than means negative. So what are our possibilities? Don't forget your x's. So if x is 0, that works. If x is positive 1, it works. If x is 0 on the bottom, it works. If x is negative 2, it works. So make your number line and plug everything in, negative 2, 0, and 1. And now place everything in its order, x and x minus 1. And let's make that a little bit deeper because that's between the top and the bottom there. And then we have x again, and then x plus 2, and our total value. All right, less than negative 2 is going to be negative. Negative 3 minus 1 is negative. Negative again on the bottom. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative. All that's going to give you a positive. So we're not looking for those. Between negative 2 and 0, how about negative 1? That'll be a negative. Negative 1 minus 1 is negative. Negative 1 again on the x, and negative 1 plus 2 is positive. That altogether is going to give us a negative. So from negative 2 to 0, now the question is, are these closed or open? So negative 2 on the bottom makes it a no solution, not possible, so that's open. A 0 on the x in the top and in the bottom makes it not possible as well. All right, so these will be parentheses. All right, from 0 to 1, you have 1/2. So 1/2 is positive. 1/2 minus 1 is negative. Positive. 1/2 plus 2 is positive. That gives us negative. So we're going to union and pick up from 0 to 1. Now, 1 is in the numerator. That makes it 0. So we're going to have a bracket there. So that's a closed-in dot. We're shaded between negative 2 and 0 and from 0 to 1. And just to make sure, let's check past 1. How about 2? 2 is positive. 2 minus 1 is positive. Positive, positive, positive. All right, now let's check the book and the answer key. There you be. 29. Okay, simplify it. Come back and let's do it together. Okay, so let's simplify here. The top still says x minus 2. The bottom factors x and 5 and 2. Needs to be a negative 3, so negative 5 plus 2. And greater than or equal to 0, so that's positive. So a positive 2 will include positive 2. It's on the top to make it equal to 0. A negative 2 will be a 0 in your denominator, so we don't want that. And so that'll be open dot, and a positive 5 will be an open dot as well. So on our number line, so negative infinity, to positive infinity, struggling here. Negative 2, positive 2, and 5. So again, a positive 2 is going to be included. That'll make it 0 on the top, and open dots on the negative 2 and the 5. Now plug everything in, x minus 2, x minus 5, x plus 2, and the total value. And let's also put your division mark in, so between the x minus 2 and the other stuff. Now, go ahead and pause it and figure out all the positives and negatives. Let's see how you do. All right, -3 I'm going to plug in. That's negative, negative, negative. That's going to give me a negative. All right, we don't want that. Between -2 and 2 is 0, so 0 minus 2 is negative. 0 minus 5 is negative. 0 plus 2 is positive. So that's going to be a positive. We're wanting that. -2 to +2, including +2, but not including 2. So shade that. Okay. And then between 2 and 5, let's try 3. 3 minus 2 is positive. 3 minus 5 is negative. 3 plus 2 is positive. That's a negative. Bigger than 5 is 6. 6 minus 2 is positive. 6 minus 5 is positive. 6 plus 2 is positive. So we do want the 5, not including the 5, to positive infinity. Union together. Okay, there's your answer. Almost there. Okay, again, we need to simplify. That's the difference of squares. Greater than 0. All right, so a 0 in the x in the top makes it equal to 0, except there's no equal sign here. So that'll be everything. If there's no equal sign, everything will be open, and opened out on a number line and parentheses only. So we have a +3 and then a -3. So draw your number line, negative infinity to positive infinity, -3, 0, and +3. Put them in order, and then place everything there. We'll have a large line between the numerator and the denominator just to keep everything straight. Again, you could do it this way, or you could put the squared in if you want. And then we have our total value. And once you get good enough, you really don't need it, but I'd want to see some work, especially on the test. So -4 we'll plug in. Let's see, these are all open, don't forget. -4 gives us a positive. -4 minus 3 is negative. -4 plus 3 is negative. So that's going to be positive. We're looking for positive answers. Greater than 0 is positive. So from negative infinity to -3, not including anything. From -3 to 0, let's try -1. That's positive. -1 minus 3 is negative. -1 plus 3 is positive. That gives us a negative value. 1 from 0 to 3, let's do 1. -3 times 1 is negative. 1 minus 3 is negative. 1 plus 3 is positive. That's going to give us a positive. So from 0 to 3, not including either one, union together. And let's try 4. -3 times 4 is negative. And -4 minus 3 is negative. -4 plus 3 is negative. That's going to give us a negative. All right, so just visually, this is what we're looking at here. And let's take a look at the answer in the book. And there's your answer, number 33. All right, here's the problem. This one, these get difficult. Everything has to be set equal to 0, so we got to subtract the 2 to the left. And now it's greater than or equal to 0, but now you got to get a common denominator. Adding fractions together from chapter 1. So this is missing the 2x minus 3. Okay? So now what do we have? We have x plus 1 minus 4x plus 6. Don't forget to distribute the minus sign through. All over the 2x minus 3. Greater than 0. Simplify. So you get a 1x minus 4x is negative 3x. And 1 plus 6 is 7, all over 2x minus 3, greater than 0. So we're looking for positive. We don't have an equal sign, so everything's going to be open on our number line. Our special numbers would be a -7 over a -3 in your numerator for x. So a negative or negative is positive. So that's 7/3. That's your possibility. And you add 3 and divide by 2, 3/2. So 7/3 is 2 1/3. 3/2 is 1/2. So the 3/2 is smaller. So 3/2, and then we have 7/3. So plug your numerator in, -3x plus 7. And then you have 2x minus 3 in the denominator. and your total value on the bottom. So what do we really have? Less than 1.5, how about 0? Negative 3 times 0 is 0, plus 7 is positive. 2 times 0 is 0, minus 3 is negative. So that's going to give us a negative. We don't want that. From 1.5 to 2 1/3 is the number 2. That makes it easy. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, plus 7 is positive. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 3 is positive. Hey, look at that. 3 halves, and these are all open to 7/3. Nothing's shaded in other than what's between the numbers. And just check above 2 1/3, how about 3? Negative 3 times 3 is negative 9, plus 7 is negative. 2 times 3 is 6, minus 3 is positive. So that's negative. We don't want those. So that should be our answer. Let's check our answer. All right. So let's go to 35. Okay. We can cross multiply. I think we should just move everything on one side and do it the long way to begin with, and then go from there. So let me move this over here. And all right, so let's get everything on one side. And that means we're going to subtract the whole term to the other side here. Greater than or equal to 0. So we're looking for positive values when we're all done. You got to get a common denominator. So we're going to multiply by the x plus 1 on this side. And we're going to multiply by the x minus 2 on that side. Okay. And let's just write everything out. 1 times x plus 1 is x plus 1. Don't forget, you got a minus 3. You got to distribute here. So that's minus 3x plus 6. And we have both terms now, both factors in the denominator, greater than or equal to 0. And then finally, let's rewrite this. 1x and minus 3x is negative 2x. And 1 plus 6 is 7. And you still have your factors. We don't leave them in factored form because it tells us what we need. Now, a negative 1 is a possibility. A 2 is a possibility. But those are in your denominators that make it equal to 0. But in your denominator, you can't have it equal to 0. So those will be open on your number line. And on the top, because we have an equal sign here, on the top, a negative 7 over a negative 2, which is positive 7 halves. That will make it equal, so this will be closed at 7 halves, which is 3 1/2. So let's draw a number line. And we have negative 1 is the smallest, then 2, and then 7 halves is 3 1/2. And it's closed at 7 halves, so I'll just go ahead and remind myself of that right away. These are open. And now we do everything else. The top is negative 2x plus 7. Whoops, 7. Draw a large number line for our fraction bar. Again, it's not necessary, but just keeping everything kind of consistent here. And then the total values. Drop down your markers. And what do we have? Less than negative 1. Let's put it in. How about negative 1,000 times a negative 2 makes it positive 2,000. That's going to be positive on the top. Negative 1,000 plus 1 is negative. Negative 1,000 minus 2 is negative. So we're going to have a positive left of negative 1. So from negative infinity to negative 1, not including negative 1, that's going to be shaded in. Okay, now how about 0? Negative 2 times 0 is 0, plus 7 is positive. 0 plus 1 is positive. 0 minus 2 is negative. That's going to give you a negative answer. From 2 to 7 halves, 2 to 3 1/2, let's plug 3 in. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, plus 7 is positive. 3 plus 1 is positive. 3 minus 2 is positive. Okay, so from 2, not including 2, to 7 halves, including 7 halves, that's union. That's going to be shaded, all those values. And we got to check bigger than 3 1/2. Let's try 4. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8, plus 7 is negative. 4 plus 1 is positive. 4 minus 2 is positive. That gives us negative. So this should be our interval notation. Let's check the book. And that's answer, which is correct. Good. 37. Again, get everything on one side. So it'll be 4 over 3x minus 2 minus the 2 over x plus 2 less than or equal to 0. So we want negative values. And we're going to multiply by the missing factors. So x plus 2 over x plus 2. and 3x minus 2. Okay, we have distribute the 4x plus 8. Distribute them negative with the 2, negative 6x plus 4. And we have x plus 2 and 3x minus 2. Wow, less than or equal to 0. All right, so now let's rewrite the top here. Oops. You have 4x and minus 6x is negative 2x, and 8 plus 4 is 12. That's going to end up being, if you factor out a negative 2, you'll get x minus 6. And then on the bottom, we still have our factors of x plus 2 and 3x minus 2. Less than or equal to 0. So our numbers, negative 2 and positive 2/3, those will be open because that's what makes your denominator go to 0. And that's not a possibility. So those are going to be open. But because of the equal sign here, whatever makes the numerator go to 0, in this case, a positive 6, will make your numerator go to 0. That will be a closed circle. So let's make our number line here. Negative infinity to positive infinity. Negative 2 is our smallest number, then a positive 2/3, and then a 6. And 6 is going to be a shaded in dot. All right, and these are all open. So now let's plug in what we have. We have a negative 2 times the x minus 6. We have x plus 2. We have 3x minus 2. And then our total values. Okay, less than negative 2, how about negative 1,000,000? Minus 6 is negative, times the negative 2 makes it positive. Negative 1,000,000 plus 2 is negative. Negative 1,000,000 times 3 minus 2 is negative. That's going to give us positive, and we want negative values, so that doesn't work. Between negative 2, and a positive 2/3 is 0. So 0 minus 6 is negative, times the negative 2 is positive. 0 plus 2 is positive. 3 times 0, 0 minus 2 is negative. That gives us a negative. So from negative 2 to 2/3, open dots, so those are parentheses. Now we know we're going to have to include 6 somehow, so let's keep checking. Between 2/3, which is less than 1, and 6, let's use 1. 1 minus 6 is negative 5, times the negative 2 is positive. 1 plus 2 is positive. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 2 is positive. That gives us a positive value. We don't want that. How about we plug in 7? 7 minus 6 is positive 1, times the negative 2 is negative. 7 plus 2 is positive. 7 times 3 is 21, minus 2 is positive. That gives us a negative. So from 6, including 6, to positive infinity, union together, that should be our answer. Okay, so they have negative 1 there. Well, I am staring at this problem. That has to be a mistake in the book. I cannot, I stopped it and was looking. I'll have to check the solution key when I have a chance. That's got to be a mistake. So we're going to go with my answer for now. All right, let's move on. We're almost done. 2 more problems. Again, move everything over. Go ahead and pause this and try to do it yourself, and then turn it back on as we progress. Less than or equal to 0. Again, we're looking for negative, and only when you have an equal sign, you're really only looking for the numerator to be equal to 0 for those zeros. So again, we got to get common denominators. So x minus 1 there, and you need to multiply by 3x minus 5 over 3x minus 5. Don't forget to distribute the negative there. Okay, let's rewrite it. On the top left, let's see, we got x squared minus x minus 6x plus 10. Very important that we can get all of this here, all right? So now, put this together, x squared minus 7x plus 10, all over 2 factors. We can factor 10 into 5 and 2, x minus 5 and x minus 2. That gives us negative 7 and also a positive 10 when multiplied together. And in the denominator, we have the 3x minus 5 and x minus 1. All right, so those values, 5/3, positive 5/3 and positive 1, will be open circles. On the top, the 5 and the 2, those will be closed circles. So let's go ahead and draw it on the number line. And the smallest number is 1. 5/3 is 1 2/3, so not quite 2. And then we have 2, and then we have 5. Okay, so all positive at the moment. Now plug in all your factors. X minus 5. Okay, x minus 2, that's all your numerator. So we'll just make a little dot here, that's our numerator. And then 3x minus 5 and x minus 1. And our final total value. So lots of different things to check here. Less than 1 would be 0. 0 minus 5 is negative. Minus 2 is negative. 3 times 0, 0 minus 5 is negative. 0 minus 1 is negative. So that's a positive value. We don't want that. Between 1 and 1 2/3, well, get over it. You might as well put 1 and 1/3 or 4/3 in. So 1 and 1/3 is 1.3. Looking at it as a decimal makes it easier. We just want the positive and negative. You don't have to solve it. So 1.3 minus 5 is negative. 1.3 minus 2 is negative. 3 times 4/3. See what I did there? Because I knew 4/3, the 3's would cancel. So 4 minus 5 is negative. And then 1.3 minus 1 is positive. Okay, altogether, that's a negative. That's what we want. So from 1 to 5/3, that's shaded. All right, now the question is it an open dot or closed dot? Well, 1 should be an open dot, and the 5/3 should be an open dot. Okay, so those are open, and these are parentheses. Now between 1 and 2/3, the 5/3, and 2. So 1 and 2/3 is 1.6, repeating. So we could do 1.8. 1.8 minus 5 is negative. 1.8 minus 2 is negative. All right, so there isn't anything to cancel with the 3 here. So 3 times 1.8. 3 times 1.8. 1.8, think of it as 18. 3 times 18 is 54, which is 5.4 minus 5 would be positive. And 1.8 minus 1 is positive. There you get a positive. We don't want those. Okay, between 2 and 5 is 3. Let's plug 3 in. Here, hold on a second. 2 and 5 are going to be closed dots. So we're going to plug 3 in. 3 minus 5 is negative. 3 minus 2 is positive. 3 times 3 is 9 minus 5 is positive, and 3 minus 1 is positive. That gives us a negative. We don't want those. Oh, wait, we do want the negative, sorry. So from 2, including 2, all the way to 5, including 5, union with the first part, that's correct. Let's check 6. 6 minus 5 is 1, which is positive. 6 minus 2 is positive. 18 minus 5 is positive, and 6 minus 1 is positive. So that should be our answer. Okay, last problem. All right, move everything over. X cubed minus x greater than 0. So we're looking for positive answers. Factor out an x, that's x squared minus 1. And x squared minus 1 is the difference of squares. So that's going to be x minus 1, x plus 1. Our exponent is a 3. So we have 3 answers. We have a 0, a negative, positive 1, and then a negative 1. Those are your 3 values. All right, number line. Negative infinity to positive infinity. Negative 1, 0, positive 1. It's not equal, so these are all open circles, open dots. We have x, x minus 1, x plus 1. And our total values. Less than negative 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative. That's going to give us a negative. We don't want those. Between negative 1 and 0, how about 0.5? That's negative 0.5. That's negative. Negative 0.5 minus 1 is a bigger negative. Negative 0.5 plus 1 is positive. There we go. Negative 1 to 0, open. From 0 to 1, we have positive 0.5. Negative, positive 0.5, that's a negative. And bigger than 1 is 1 million. That's positive, positive, positive. So from 1 to positive infinity. Let's check our last answer. And there you go. All right, now we can get started on getting ready for your test.